Hello and welcome to Hey Boomer, the show for those of us who believe that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. I am your host, Wendy Green, and today we are going to be talking about what it's like to be an adoptee, what the experience is as a child in an adopted family, what the experience is of trying to locate your birth parents and how difficult that can be and what some of the outcomes of that may be. And we are going to be basing this episode on a documentary that is called Reckoning with the Primal Wound, which our guest was a part of that documentary. And it talks about the primal wound that many adopted children and adults experience. And it got me thinking about when I was pregnant, and I loved being pregnant. I know that's not the experience for everybody. My daughter did not like being pregnant, but I loved it. I kind of tracked every moment of it and what was happening. And, you know, if you think about it, I mean, as the mother, we are sharing our blood system, we are sharing nourishment, we are sharing our emotions. They say that the fetus can hear through the uterine wall. And so we are sharing all of that with the child. And then suddenly this child is born, the umbilical cord is cut, and they're an individual. In my case, when my daughter was born, they took her away for 12 hours. I was like crazy. I never got to hold her at the moment she was born. Totally different experience with my son. I did get to hold him. He did not leave the delivery room for quite a while, you know, for them to clean him up, because I was holding him and trying to nurse him. So it was a totally different experience when my son was born. And it made me think about how difficult it would be for a birth mother to have to let go of the child that she has nourished and raised and, you know, grown inside of her for all of those years. But I don't know how the child feels when they are suddenly taken away. So that's part of what we are going to talk about in this episode. My guest today, Doris Blumenthal, may never have been held by her mother. She doesn't know. Her adoption was prearranged, and so she was, you know, adopted from the moment she was born. She knew she was adopted. She also knew that she didn't quite fit into her adopted family. And there were, you know, feelings that she experienced that she wasn't really able to understand as a young child. And then when she got older and wanted to find her birth parents, that became quite a challenge because of the closed adoptions that were part of the reality when she was adopted in the 60s. So the story that she has to tell about that journey is quite an interesting and amazing story, and we'll talk about that as well. Before I bring her on, I want to mention one of my sponsors. Her name is Christine Baumgartner, and she is a relationship coach. And she works with people that, in two ways, people that are tired of the dating game, trying to find a life partner again at this stage in our lives, and how difficult and challenging that seems. So she works with those people, and she also works with those of us who have started a new relationship as older adults, and, you know, we bring a lot of baggage with us. And so she works with them to work through some of the challenges and find ways to really nurture and grow the new relationship. You can find Christine on her website, theperfectcatch.com. And there's a a little quiz that you can take there, and then you get a free complimentary session with her. So if you are thinking about sprucing up your relationship or trying to find a new relationship, check out Christine at theperfectcatch.com. I also wanted to invite you to the Hey Boomer Banter. And the Hey Boomer Banter is a place where we get together monthly as members. It's a membership. It's a membership opportunity. And we get together and we talk about things that are important and relevant and fun. I always suggest we do it the third Tuesday of every month. I always suggest people bring their favorite nighttime beverage and let's just relax and talk and build relationships and build community. We do break into smaller groups so that we have more intimate discussions. This month, which is February 21st, when we're going to be meeting, we're talking about friendship, all different kinds of friendships. If you're interested in trying out the banter, drop me an email. I will send you a one-time link to the Zoom link, and you will be able to join us one time without being a member and find out how much you love it. If you have participated in one of our banters before and you happen to be listening to this show, go ahead and leave some comments in the chat to let us know how much you enjoyed the banter. All right. So, Doris was born in San Francisco in 1961, and as I said, she was adopted immediately. She grew up in a multicultural suburb of San Francisco and attended the University of California, Davis campus, where she met her husband, Rob. And then they moved to the Sierra foothills in 1990 and raised their son there. After her parents passed, that's when she began her journey to find her birth families. And she found the birth family details around 2015 with the help of the almasociety.org and findmyfamily.org. Her search story is featured in the documentary Reckoning with the Primal Wound, which was produced and directed by Rebecca Autumn Sansome and premiered last year at the Catalina Film Festival. Doris is a very active community volunteer, and her primary focus is making health care available to the underserved and especially to children. She has been happily married for 37 years and is an avid traveler. So with that, welcome, Doris.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. So glad to have you here. Thank you for this. Okay, so Doris, I wanted to start out with, we said that you were adopted immediately and that you didn't feel like you really fit into your family that adopted you. So can you tell me about your early childhood experiences?
Well, it was no secret at all that I was adopted. It was my birth announcement literally said, "Hello, I'm adopted." And then when you opened it, it said, "I wasn't expected, I was selected," which adds a whole lot of burden of performance on the kids' part. People were overjoyed from my mom and dad, and I remember a lot of comments just like, "You're so lucky to have them as your parents. You're so, wow, where would you be if it wasn't for them?" And as an adult now, I pretty much figure somebody else would have bought me. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to is I was a commodity. And I don't know if my birth mother had any say. Nowadays, a lot of times when you give up a child, you can help select the parent and, you can look for certain maybe religious needs or educational, what's important to you for the child that you're entrusting to somebody else. I believe that back then, being an unwed parent was just so shameful. And that shame clouded onto me in that here I was, this sort of mistake or you know, bad event, and I was rescued by my mom and dad when they adopted me. So I remember that very clearly. I remember, immediately looking at my mom's extended family with whom we spent a lot of time, and we all went to the same church. Most of us lived in the same town, and, quickly noticing I didn't look like anybody. I had this flaky red curly hair. Everybody else's hair was pretty much pin straight. I was very, very fair skinned, and my mom and her mom were both very olive complected Swedes. As every year went by, it was really obvious that these were not my birth parents. And it wasn't like we'd never tried to cover it up or anything, but I think I felt like it just made the fact that I was adopted so evident, much like I would think a biracial adoptee would be, where you're Asian and you're growing up with white parents or whatever. And I'm not saying that causes your parents to love you any less if you don't look like them, but it does raise a lot of questions that unadopted people don't have to deal with.
Right. And as a child, you experienced other families where, mom and dad were the birth parents, and obviously your parents weren't. Was there any feeling from the other children that you were different?
It would be mentioned. I think kids themselves are pretty tolerant of a lot of things, and not so much in my younger years, but when I got into my teen years and it was becoming really clear that my adopted mother was somewhat mentally ill, I remember friends saying to me, well, at least you're adopted, and whatever is with her, hopefully won't be transferred to you. But I don't feel like you'd get a lot of questions. Well, who's your real mom and dad? And I had been taught very early on, my adoptive parents were my real mom and dad. You're conditioned from day one to try to forget that there was ever, that you were carried by anyone else, that somehow you just dropped from the sky into your adoptive parents' hands, and there was no prior relationship with anybody up until that point, and that's it.
Yeah. And, and these comments that people make about, you're so lucky that you were adopted. I mean, they're well-meaning, but what does that feel like when you hear that?
It gives you a huge feeling of having to be responsible for showing your gratitude, for maybe keeping silent and keeping sweet a little bit more than most kids would, because how ungrateful is it if you disagree with your parent, or you tell them you don't like something, or you don't want to go to this place or that place because they adopted you. So you owe them. You literally owe them kind of your existence, and society conditions you to be grateful. And if you're not grateful, you are the worst person ever, because what kind of person wouldn't be grateful for being rescued from some horrible unknown fate?
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem, is there's sort of an assumption that if you weren't adopted, you'd end up like Oliver Twist in a workhouse or something, grinding away at a millstone all day long and eating gruel. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. Like I said, I think if my parents hadn't made the arrangement, somebody else would have. Would I have been better off or less better off? I don't know. But,
right.
But it is a very burdensome thing to be told over and over, oh, you must be so grateful. You're so lucky. And then in my case, having that compounded with a mother who probably shouldn't have been a mother, honestly, she had 9 miscarriages before she had me. I think the universe was definitely trying to tell her something, and she didn't want to listen. And so that's a whole other element in my mind of the whole adoption issue, is the fitness of the parent and what kind of screening. Now, I think in most cases, it's much stricter, but especially in adoptions arranged out of this country, it's really become a commodification situation where, I know a lot of adoptees from the Soviet Union, and it seems as though their stories are very similar, where maybe their parents are very poor or addicted. Somehow one of the parents ends up in the hospital and the child is with them, and the government sweeps in to rescue the child, removes them from their parents, and then adopts them to another country for a very hefty price. Mm-hmm. And so there's this whole business of adoption. It's just, it's all such a complicated web, and there's no way to say how you could make it better.
Yeah. So the primal wound, is that all of this feeling of I don't fit in, or
I think,
how do you describe that?
I think it's how I see it is, there was a woman, my mother, grew me inside of her for approximately 10 months. I lived another person. That in and of itself has to give you a bond that you don't ever forget it. You don't literally remember it because you were a fetus, but there's a connection there. And when I was born, that connection was just completely split. It was severed, never to be brought back again. And that's my wound, is that connection that I had to the person you are literally closest to in your whole entire existence is just swept away. And you don't ever get it back. And the comfort that you seek when you're a kid, if you're injured or scared, you go to whoever's raising you, or anybody that will hold you at that moment or pick you up if you've fallen down till your mommy can get there or whatever. But at some point, there's not that actual connection. And one of the things I found out just at the premiere of the film was a lot of us don't expect any of our relationships to last. It's not a reflection on our partners or our friends or our loved ones. But what I said during the Q&A at the film was that I know my husband loves me. I absolutely know he loves me. But if he walked in right this minute and said, I don't want you in my life anymore, I'm leaving, I'd be totally devastated, but I wouldn't be surprised.
That initial sense of abandonment.
Yeah, I really, and it, like I said, it's my good friends. I know they have my back. I know they love me dearly. And the last thing I want to do is hurt anybody with my words or the way I think. But I truly wouldn't be surprised. I mean, God forbid, even my own son, if he said tomorrow, Mom, I just don't want you in my life anymore. Yeah, I figured that was going to happen. I mean, that's just, and when I said that on the stage at the Q&A, the 4 women that were up there with me all said, oh my gosh, me too. That's exactly how I feel all the time.
So
and we were all raised by different people. Some of us were raised by fabulous parents. Some of us were in and out of, social workers and all that. But we all seem to have that commonality that we just don't expect. We can't. I don't think we're even capable of feeling that security okay, they will be there forever, because we've never had that.
Because you were abandoned right away, immediately
Exactly.
taken away. Yeah.
Exactly. Or,
So,
if I have a better word, relinquished me. I don't feel like my birth mom abandoned me so much as she had no choice and she just had to leave me.
yeah.
And that was society. And, but I don't know. I mean, it is a feeling of abandonment, but I hate to say she abandoned me because that makes her sound like a bad person. And she did the very best. I believe she did the very best with the choices in front of her in 1961, of which there really weren't any.
Yeah. So let's talk about, Doris, what prompted you to try to find your birth parents, your birth families, and what that journey was like.
Well, of course, like I said, growing up, kids, well, do you know your real mom? Do you know your real dad? The neighborhood I grew up in, because it was almost all first generation, I can't think of hardly anybody on my whole entire street that didn't have at least one foreign-born grandparent living with them, from all over the place. And so in each of our households, our cultures were very important to us. My dad came over here in 1948. That's how new we are to America. And so there's this really strong sense of culture and, the pride of being Italian, or in our cases, being Finn Swedes, or the people next door to us who were Greek. Very, very important in our neighborhood. And I think in any big city among working class, if you're an immigrant, you're very proud of where you came from. You're super proud that you're in the States now, but boy, you've got that Finnish drive or whatever. So when I would look at myself, I was raised a Swede. We were bilingual at home, but the older I got, I was like, I'm not really Swedish.
Yeah, Doris is having some trouble with her internet right now. So this Reckoning with the Primal Wound documentary tells the story of her trying to find her birth families. And okay, you're back. So let's see if you can get the story through about the search for your birth families.
I started looking on and off, and before my parents passed away, but this was pre-internet. So you couldn't write a piece of paper, put it in the mail, send it to someplace, and then they would go through hundreds and hundreds of inquiries trying to match up your date of birth and place of birth. So it was just a huge, arduous, almost unthinkable task. And probably around, I'm going to say 1996-ish or so, I read an article in one of the women's magazines about the Alma Society, which is an organization that fights for adoptee rights. And they had a registry. So I wrote to them and I registered with them and never heard anything back initially. And then life got busy and I had a child. And then in 2007, my parents came to live with us, and I never ever could mention to my birth that I was interested in finding, to my adopted parents that I was interested in finding my birth parents, because it was like the ultimate horrible insult, and how dare I want to do that, and what was wrong with them and all. So once they passed, I decided, you know what, I'm going to just try to start looking now. We have internet, we have all these resources. So I contacted Alma online, and within hours, but it was no longer than a day, I got a response, and they said, well, we've been trying to find you. We think we have some records for you. And I couldn't believe it. And so they sent me what they thought was possibly the last name and the first two initials of my birth dad. And so I looked that name up on the internet and only found a person in Minnesota who had that matched that. And unfortunately, he had passed away, but in a way that was a little bit good because he had an obituary. And the obituary lists names of his daughters, who are my half sisters. And I immediately went to Facebook, pulled up the sister closest to me in age, and she looked like me. First person besides my son I've ever seen that looks like me. And I called my husband and my son. I'm like, look at this lady. Doesn't she look like me? And they're like, oh gosh. And I'm like, this is crazy. So I was kind of going down a good path, with my search as far as that side, but I was really lost as far as the birth mother. And as I'm waiting for either one of my sisters or one of their kids to contact me, because I sent little notes out to everybody saying, I think I might somehow be related to you. I could keep it vague because I certainly didn't want to say their dad had fathered a child that they didn't know about and then find out later I had one guy. And so I contacted a second agency called findmyfamily.org and reached out to them. And they were able somehow to get me the last name of my birth mother, the maiden name. And I found that although I had never in my life heard this last name, it was very common in the area where my parents were from. So there was a whole lot of people with this last name. And I started being able to narrow it down. And I found a woman who was best friends with my birth dad's sister with that last name, who lived across the street. And I thought, oh, it's got to be her. So I contacted her son, and the woman is pretty profound dementia. But her son said, well, I don't know. I don't know, if she is or not. She never mentioned it to me. But you're welcome to come to Las Vegas and speak with her, with me present, which I totally stood. And so I went out, and she was just the cutest thing. And at one point she looked at me and she said, well, I don't know, honey. I think if I'd had a daughter and given her up, I'd remember. And, which you would, who knows when you have dementia, if you would or not. But as it turned, she was not my birth mom, but her cousin was.
Okay.
And by now I had been in contact with my sisters, and one of my birth dad's sisters sent yearbooks out to me and marked the pages with every female with this last name. And so I was looking through, and then I found who was pretty much my twin. And
really,
that absolutely floored me. I couldn't believe the resemblance I have. I should have printed them, but there's a picture of my birth dad at about 14 and a picture of my son at the same age, and they identical. And my birth mom, until around her 20s, she and I resembled each other very, very strongly. And
interesting.
had a lot of the same habits, which I thought was really odd. Like,
how did you find that out?
For years. And because when my half brother, her son, wrote a write up on our mom, he said she had a half pack of Benson and Hedges ultralight 100s in her pocket, which is the exact brand I smoked almost the entire time that I was a smoker. And it's a very odd, it's not like Marlboro or Camel that, everybody smokes has had. She was a voracious reader. She loved to have a cocktail. Just weird little things. And then as I started doing more research, I was able to trace where she lived in San Francisco and, in the Bay Area later. And at times during my growing up, we lived a mile apart.
Oh, that's
which
weird.
I think is just so strange. I would probably pass her in the grocery store. I don't know. And again, I don't have any idea if she ever met my parents that raised me. So I don't know if this was intentional or it was just a fluke. I mean, the Bay Area is huge. And the fact that she and I lived so close together, and then later in college at different times, but still, my half brother and I both lived in the same apartment building.
Jeez. That's wild.
So, I mean, it is. It's very, very strange. So finally, through really doing a lot of research, and thankfully, Arizona, which is where my birth mother moved to, they're very open with their records, which was really nice. So my birth mother's half-sister was very helpful in telling me the town she lived in and an address that she had used to live at that she had rented. And what my aunt told me was that she was now living in another home owned by the same people who owned the house she rented. So I was able to contact the records and find out who owned the first house she lived in. And then they told me what other properties these people owned. And one of the things my aunt told me is that my mom was living in a downstairs apartment, and then the garage of the house was above her because it was on a hillside. And then when the people who owned the home would travel, my mom would go stay in the house. So now I know where she is. And so what do? We drive to Arizona, of course, because got to go find her. So we drive all the way to Prescott, Arizona. And the first house we went to was actually the wrong address. And that's when we went the next day to the county records office. And this woman who had been so incredibly helpful, she pulled up the other properties, and we were not only able to get the address, we could see the building plans. So we knew this was the right place because we could see the garage with the apartment and the house and all this. So that was at about 2:00 in the afternoon because they had just come back from lunch. We got in the car, drove to the house, went up to the front door, and the front door was completely glass, so you could see inside. And it looked into a family room and kitchen. And on the kitchen counter, I could see a pair of glasses just like laid down, a book overturned, marking a spot, a pack of cigarettes, and a mug. And so nobody answered. And I said to my husband, well, she must have just run out to the post office or the store or something, because you wouldn't go away and just leave your things just sitting there for, a vacation or something. So we left.
So you had not contacted her ahead of time to let her know you were coming.
I didn't, because I just wanted to see her once. And I was afraid if I told her I was coming, she would say, don't come. And if she said, I don't want to see you, I would have had to respect that. So I didn't want to give her the opportunity to do that. Because I just wanted to see her once. And this sounds really odd, but sounds really funny. I wanted to smell her. And I know it sounds strange, but there's something about when you hug someone you really, really are connected to, part of that feeling is their essence. It's just like smelling a certain aroma or a flower that takes you back to a certain memory, really specifically. And I don't know why, but it was just really important to me to hug her once and feel that. And so we went back to our hotel and we talked for a while. And then I got a message from my half-brother via Facebook that said, it's come to my attention that you're in Prescott and you want to harass my mother and she doesn't want to see you. And if you contact her, I'm going to call the police, and you have a picture of her on Facebook and you need to take that down because you can't put that up. And it was just very nasty. And I tried to stay as nice as I could. And if you know me, sometimes that's a bit of a stretch. I wrote back and I said, you know what? I'm here and I own the picture. So if I want to put it on a billboard, I will. And I'm not going to harass her. I'm certainly not here to shake down a woman who basically has no money. I just want to see her once. And if that displeases you, I'm sorry. And if you want to call the police, go right ahead, because I don't think I've committed any crimes, nor do I plan to. So have a good day. And we went to go to dinner, and I said to my husband, because we were leaving the next day, I said, you know, I'm just going to call her. I'm going to leave a message, tell her my intent, and called, left a message, said, hi, it's me. I don't know if you want to see me or not, but I came all this way. I just want to meet with you once. If you don't want to do it at your home, we can meet in a park or a library or a coffee place. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to see you once, just one time. And honestly, I would like you to see your grandson because I'm very proud of him and he's a wonderful person. And I just want you to meet him once. And I'm going to start getting emotional. Sorry. And so we went to dinner, and we were walking back, and my phone rang, and it was her number. And I just got, like chills. I was like, oh my God, she's calling me. She's calling me. This is great. And I pick up the phone, and it's a man. And he says, is this Doris Blumenthal? Or no, he said, this is Sergeant whoever. Who am I speaking to? And I said, well, why are you calling me? What do you want? And he said, well, you called this number. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, why are you calling it? And at this point, I thought perhaps my brother had enlisted the help to throw me off the course. I really believe this was a policeman, because why would a policeman call me? I hadn't done anything illegal. So why would the cops be involved in this? And so I started this whole thing like, you are not a policeman, stop it. I know my brother put you up to this, blah, 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 blah. And the policeman's like, no, I'm just trying to track down somebody who knows your birth mom. And I said, well, why? What's going on? And he said, well, who are you? And I said, okay. I said, I was adopted. She's my birth mom. What is going on? And he said, well, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but she's passed away. Like my legs buckled.
Yeah, you're so close.
And I still was kind of in a sense of disbelief, is this really true? Or is my brother or somebody calling me to say she's dead, so I'll go away? And so I said, I looked at Rob and Tim, and I think I might have even given Rob the phone. It's kind of a blur. And so I said, well, I do have a half brother. This is his name. This is where he lives. I don't have a phone number. I'm sorry. But if you're on her phone, clearly. So I'm sure he's in there. I said, or else we have an aunt and I can give you her number. And so, we started to go back to the hotel, and we're walking back there, and the phone rings again. And this time it was a different number. And so I answered it, and it was the detective using his own phone. And he said, where are you? And I said, well, we're walking on the square back to the hacienda. And he said, I need you to go back there and stay there till I get there. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, your brother has indicated that you might be a person of interest. You may somehow be involved in your mom's passing.
Right.
And I said, but I've never even met her. This doesn't make any sense. My whole mind at this point was just absolutely reeling. So we went back to the hotel, and the deputy came out and, interviewed me. And, we had, first of all, we're like, your average American family. Clearly, we didn't go and whack some old lady we'd never met. And second of all, we had been at the county records office just prior to her death, and we had a very traceable day. We covered our steps well. No, I mean, we were able to really back up what we were saying we had done, and he was really satisfied with that, and gave his condolences and said, I really hope you can work things out with your brother, which never happened.
But as it turns out, you never got to meet your mom or your dad.
No.
But you do have a relationship with your half-sisters.
My sisters and I are very close, and my one sister has 4 children, and I enjoy them and their children very much. And then my mom's half-sister, my Auntie Myra, she and I get along fabulously. I was just out in Minnesota over the summer for a week and got to visit everybody. And that whole side of the family has just been wonderful. And the first time I went to go meet my sisters, my sister's side of the family had a big get together so I could meet everybody. And it's been really nice. I think I've met my dad came from a really big family, like 8 kids, and a few of them have passed, but I'm not positive. I think I've met everybody. It's a lot when you go from being an only child and, suddenly you're meeting this aunt and that aunt and these cousins and those people. It gets kind of blurry, but I'm at a point, with the exception of my relationship with my brother, that I'm at peace about everything. I still would like to have a relationship with my brother. I understand his point of view. I understand that he had no idea, I don't think, that I existed. I think, much like one of my sisters was a little angry at first because our father died of cancer and was quite ill for a few months and needed very intense care, which my sisters provided to him. And I think my one sister really feels like, since he knew he was dying, maybe he should have said something or disclosed the fact, oh, by the way, somewhere out there. And so I think there's a slight feeling of betrayal or, my dad that I thought I was so close to, I feel like I shattered that for her. Yeah. And so I think that's the case with my brother as well. I think that I know from everything I've read, my birth mom worked her butt off because my brother's dad died when my brother was 2 as the result of an accident. So my birth mom had a very difficult life. I mean, it was not easy. And she cleaned houses and taught school and worked super, super hard to provide for my brother. And I think that made them very close. So I think I'm a reminder to him that there was something he didn't know about.
Right. Well, you know what? This is an amazing story, Doris. You have processed all of this as well as you possibly could. And I know that, there's, I don't know. I would imagine there's some sadness that it didn't all come together the way you wanted to, but at least you have some answers. And I appreciate that you were willing to share it with us. If anybody has questions for Doris about the search, she mentioned 2 organizations, the ALMA Society, that's ALMA, the almasociety.org, and findmyfamily.org. You can, she has graciously said that we could email her. That email is Dosi Dream Girl. So that's DOSI, which was a nickname for her, Dosi Dream Girl @hotmail.com. So if you are looking for your birth family and you have any questions for Doris, you can reach out to her there. I want to give a shout out to the Greenville.
And I'm certainly not an expert. So
But yeah, you have some insights that you could help with. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't want people to have the expectation or think that I think I know everything about adoption or what it's like to be adopted. I know my experience.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm willing to try to help if people need some help, but I can't fix.
Right.
I couldn't even fix my situation. So,
well, yeah. Thanks for that clarification. Before I end, I want to give a shout out to the Greenville Podcast Company for their expert editing and production of the Hey Boomer podcast, which is available in all the podcast apps, and this will be as well. I also want to invite you to join us on the Hey Boomer Banter on February the 21st. It's 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening. That's Eastern time. So if you want to try it out, join us. You can email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz, and I will send you a link for that. And if you are looking for some relationship help, whether it's dating help or trying to work out the kinks in a new relationship or even an existing relationship, check out Christine Baumgartner on theperfectcatch.com. So next week, we're going to meet two teenagers, Avery Simon and Eleanor McGirt. They're juniors at Malden High School, and last year they started a club at their school called the Young Women's Forum. It is for all who identify as female, and the group aims to create a community of support and activism for girls at their high school. So why am I having teenagers on the Hey Boomer show? Well, because young women like this are our future, and promoting what they're doing and building intergenerational conversations, that's important to me. And understanding some of the issues that this generation is dealing with and how they are different from some of the issues that we dealt with and how they are the same as some of the issues that we dealt with. So I think this is going to be a really interesting, eye-opening conversation, and it's an opportunity for us to find ways to work with young women to help them as they move forward. And I always like to leave you with the belief that we can all live with passion, live with relevance, and live with courage. And remember, you are never too old to set a new goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.